All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, JK, and we are kicking off episode number 208 of Help Me Understand. Before getting into today's fitness adjacent episode to talk about fat burners, a few things that you should know. First and foremost, as always, let's choose to take a moment of gratitude, or I'm going to choose to take a moment of gratitude and say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. I truly never take it for granted with knowing that you have so many podcasts that you can listen to these days. So never take it for granted that you chose to press play on Help Me Understand. So thank you so much for being here. And let's go ahead and get into today's episode. So on Tuesdays, the topics are fitness adjacent. So they can range from what I'm going to talk about today with talking about supplements, specifically fat burners, talking about different aspects of training, how to maximize your training, and anything in between, really. As long as it's somewhat fitness, nutrition, training adjacent, then I am open to covering that. So I say that because if you do have a fitness related question that you would like me to answer or cover, or a topic that you'd like my perspective on, there's a link in the show notes where you can submit a suggestion for any topic. And doesn't necessarily have to be fitness related, although on Tuesdays, I do keep the episodes more fitness and nutrition adjacent. You can submit a topic, question, news article, whatever, for possible inclusion in a future Help Me Understand episode. So let's talk about fat burners. So with fat burning supplements, the first thing that I want to bring to your attention or remind you of, hopefully, is that anything that is under the supplement category is specifically going to be used or marketed, at least, as a supplement versus a substitute. So supplements can be anything from, and this won't be an all-inclusive list, you can do fat burners, you can take creatine, protein powder, greens powders, pre-workout is also a supplement. I mean, there's no shortage. There's BCAAs. There's so many different ones that are out there. And specifically today, I'm covering fat burners because it's a question that I received. Like, hey, I get it that fat burners don't actually work. So why do they continue to be sold? And why are there some people who do believe that they work? So I'm going to cover three things when it comes to fat burners. First, I'm going to talk to you about, from my perspective, what they actually do and don't do. Then I'm also, second, going to cover some of the common ingredients and what the effects of those particular ingredients are. And I did have to take a couple of notes on this to jog my memory, just because I haven't really dug into fat burners in quite some time. And then we'll wrap up with talking about some of the risks to generally be aware of, and also some potential alternatives. And really, spoiler alert, the alternatives are going to be the things that I think would be a prerequisite to include or to make sure that you've got covered before getting into even taking a fat burner. So that basically just spoiled the whole episode. But you know what? You're here. You might as well listen all the way to the end. So first, let's talk about what fat burners actually do. So a lot of folks tend to think that fat burners are actually going to burn fat, like they're actually going to melt the fat away, but that's not what they actually do. They don't directly burn body fat. So the way that most fat burners will work is that they will include particular ingredients that are going to potentially increase the metabolism just slightly by suppressing your appetite and then potentially boosting your energy. So you can potentially, quote unquote, burn more calories because you're intaking less calories because your appetite is then suppressed. If that kind of makes sense. You can already tell right off the bat, I'm not really a big fan of fat burners. So I'm trying to present at least somewhat of a two sides of the argument, let's say. So again, fat burners don't really work at burning the fat itself. It's really about creating other conditions that potentially will put you into a caloric deficit. So that's really the key. And that was the second point that I had down here, is that the real key to actual fat loss is going to be remaining in a caloric deficit. So what fat burners potentially could do for you is that they will affect different things that help you stay in the calorie deficit, again, by trying to suppress your appetite and or including a buttload of caffeine to try to increase the amount of energy that you have. However, the thing to remember always when it comes to any sort of a supplement is that, and especially with fat burners, they will not ever override a poor diet and or any poor training habits that you have. So simply taking a fat burner and not changing any of the behaviors that you currently have when it comes to the types of foods that you're eating, maybe even not even changing the amount of food that you're eating. And then also, if you are not training in an effective way or even not training at all, then you can't really expect that a fat burner or really any other supplement is going to do the work for you. All right. So now let's talk about some of the ingredients that are commonly in fat burners. And really, I find that there's about 2 or 3 that tend to be included in most fat burners. So the first and foremost is going to be caffeine. So caffeine does tend to be found in most fat burners. And what that will do, caffeine basically will blunt the signal that tells you that you are sleepy. So it then increases the amount of alertness that you have because it's trying to block that signal telling you like, hey, it's time to wind down. We're really feeling the effects of low energy. Caffeine is the stimulant that will then basically try and block that particular signal from coming through. It will basically like increase the amount of alertness that you have and give you potentially more energy. However, the flip side of that, and this maybe would be more in the risk category, the flip side of that is that it also, depending on what your tolerance is for caffeine, that can start to really affect you as far as making you like kind of jittery. And then you also potentially, depending on, again, what your tolerance is and how your body processes caffeine, can also start to bleed over into giving you some potential sleep issues. Something else to remember too, when it comes to caffeine intake, is that even though it may get you super high, at some point there's going to be the come down, like it always happens. So that is why you may find folks who are like riding sky high around like midday when they're just pounding a bunch of caffeine, their 17th cup of coffee or whatever the case may be. And then all of a sudden they get like late afternoon, kind of going into the evening, and they are just dead to the world completely. So you can also have a crash from that. So caffeine being one of the main ingredients. Another ingredient that is typically going to be found in a fat burner is going to be green tea extract. That does contain some compounds, and I'm not like deeply familiar with all the ins and outs of green tea extract, but there have been some studies that a green tea extract may slightly enhance fat oxidation. I won't spend a ton of time on that particular one. However, there is some evidence that's out there that green tea extract can potentially have a slight increase, and we are talking ever so slight increase in fat oxidation. Another or 2 other ones that I found that tend to be pretty commonly included, and I'm not sure that I'm going to pronounce these correctly, is yohimbine and synephrine. So both of those are stimulants that essentially will increase your heart rate. Again, got to be careful with things like that because this is where those things also tend to come with risks. So these are yohimbine and synephrine along with caffeine. These are all particular ingredients that really start to affect your central nervous system. Like these are that's why you get that kind of like jazzed up, like really amped up feeling with those. So remember that just as good, quote unquote, that those things make you feel, and just as much as they really like amp you up and give you a bunch of energy, at some point that energy is going to come down. So again, lost my train of thought here. Main ingredients that tend to be found in fat burners are going to be caffeine, green tea extract, yohimbine, and synephrine. Something else that I will mention here too is that when it comes to supplements, the supplement industry is highly unregulated. And by highly regulated, what I mean is that there are quite a few, if not most supplements are not regulated by the FDA for accuracy. So you can have not only fat burners, this also applies to protein bars, protein powders, pre-workouts, creatine supplements. I mean, pretty much just anything supplement wise. There's a lot that's really unregulated and goes unchecked there. So you can have something that claims to have, let's kind of shift it from fat burners for a second. You can have something that claims to have, let's say, 20 grams of protein in it. However, you've really got to pay attention as to whether or not the products that you're consuming are third party tested, because just because something says it has 20 grams of protein, well, what type of protein? Are we talking like pea protein, or are we talking whey protein? And then is there a bunch of filler that's in there? And when I say filler, usually when there's a product that has a lot of filler in it, what you will find is that if you look at the ingredients on the back, it will, one of the areas that it will include is some sort of like quote unquote proprietary. If you're watching this on YouTube, you see my air quote fingers, proprietary blend. So let's say that it is like a fat burning supplement, and it's got a certain amount of caffeine, it has a certain amount of green tea, and it has a certain amount of synephrine. And they will advertise, kind of blend all those things together and say that it's our special, like super jazzy-fied calcide mix. I definitely just made that up. But basically, anytime that you see some supplement company advertise that something has their proprietary blend, and also that it's not third party tested, meaning that they've had a company that's not affiliated with them do independent lab testing to ensure that what they're saying is in the product or on the label is actually there in the amounts that they're saying that it's there, then you should approach that with an increased or heightened level of skepticism. And I say this as someone who does utilize supplements. I don't utilize a fat burner. I do utilize pre-workout. I utilize creatine, beta alanine, and protein powder, multivitamin, and a fish oil, and magnesium. So I do utilize those particular supplements and vitamins on a pretty regular basis. So even for the things that I consume, like the protein powder, I'm not real picky when it comes to protein powder. I'm, for the most part, price and taste driven when it comes to protein. Just straight up, that's how it goes, because I have found that I don't really encounter any sort of digestive issues or anything along those lines. So I'm good to take whatever. I am potentially like one of, I was going to say the least helpful. I think that's maybe not giving myself some credit. I'm one of the less discriminating people when it comes to suggesting a protein powder. So when people reach out to me for suggestions with a protein powder, I typically am recommending something and giving them the caveat that, just as a heads up, I'm recommending this just because I know it's about, you can find it on sale for 25 to 30 bucks for 30 servings. And I have no idea if you have any sort of digestive issues or anything along those lines. So you may be better off doing some additional research to try to get an understanding of what works for you or what doesn't. I know a lot of folks have really raved about Legion products. I'm not affiliated with Legion at all. However, I know a few folks that are and really tend to love their products. I did use their protein for a while. It just kind of it's priced in an area that I'm not willing to pay for protein, especially just because I really don't have any sort of stomach issues or anything like that. So anyways, kind of got off base. So we'll get back to finishing things up with fat burners. So we've talked about what they are and what they do. talked about some of the common ingredients. So now, again, just to reiterate before moving into just the last part here, is that, again, a lot of the things that may be included in fat burners, a lot of, again, the filler type stuff, especially when it's got a fancy name to it, like the super jazzmatized fat burning Ultra Matrix 2027 model or whatever they're calling it. Like that tends to be more hype than anything, and particular chemicals that potentially are being in there to make something taste good, maybe give it a little bit more buzz to it, like some additional beta alanine and all that stuff, and don't necessarily have any sort of significant scientific backing to actually prove that it does what it says it's going to do. All right. So a few things that you should know as we wrap things up here is that some fat burners can definitely cause side effects. And some of those side effects can be things like increased heart rate. We already talked about the amount of caffeine that can be in the fat burners, and also other particular things that are included, ingredients that are included to try to really suppress your hunger level or suppress your appetite. And that's really one of the main ways that fat burners really claim to work. Again, not burning the actual body fat itself, but trying to suppress your actual appetite. Some folks may also report that based on some of the different chemicals that are included, they may start to feel some sort of anxiety, just kind of like it starts to kind of get in your head a little bit, and also potentially some digestive issues too. Keep in mind that when you see marketing about really rapid results when it comes to rapid fat loss, rapid weight loss, whatever the case may be when it comes to fat burners, that although that particular individual may have experienced that, what you will often find is that, number one, there will always be some sort of disclaimer where it will say in like tiny print or a fast talking person at the end, results not typical or paired with proper nutrition and exercise. And it's like, well, no duh, anything paired. I can eat an extra can of corn and, pair that with proper nutrition and exercise. I'm probably going to see results, so that is something to keep in mind. So do definitely keep that in mind. And also, let's see here. I keep losing my train of thought. It's been a kind of a long day here. So just keeping in mind those particular things where there can be particular side effects and different things like that. And there's going to be promises that are made that may not necessarily be typical results that you are going to see. So to wrap things up here, when it comes to, okay, so what are some alternatives to fat burners? And the crazy thing here is that from my perspective, the best alternative to a fat burner is actually what should be the prerequisite before you consider even entertaining taking a fat burner. And those would be things like a well-balanced diet. And when I say well-balanced diet, I'm talking about a diet as far as your nutrition and what you consume, not being on a diet. So a well-balanced nutritional intake where you are eating primarily whole, minimally processed foods, including some things that you enjoy, eating the right amount of food for the goals and the lifestyle that you desire. So having your nutrition set, then also having a proper sleep routine, knowing for the most part, what's my wind down routine when it's time to go to bed? What's my wake up routine when it's time to get up? How am I managing and regulating my energy throughout the day? And then also a proper training protocol. Am I lifting weights? Am I doing some cardio? Am I getting in my steps? Am I moving fairly regularly throughout the day, throughout the week? So prior to considering or entertaining a fat burner, my strong recommend for you is to first make sure that you're taking care of all the prerequisites really and the foundational stuff. Also, keep in mind that a fat burner is a supplement, not a substitute. So if you're looking at, okay, well, I'm going to take a fat burner because what it's going to do is it's going to give me more energy, or it's going to help me burn fat because I'll have more energy. Well, caffeine itself also will give you more energy. So you could potentially, if you wanted to, maybe you're looking at, okay, well, I don't really use caffeine. I certainly could try like 50 milligrams of caffeine and just see what that does for my body. Like if you're considering taking some sort of a fat burning supplement, be aware of what's actually inside of the supplement itself and the products that potentially have some research behind them that's backed, that shows you what particular ingredients can actually be helpful. Like caffeine can be managed properly, big caveat here, managed properly can potentially be helpful. And also it should not be a band-aid or something that you're using to hide taking care of, well, what potentially may be causing you to be sluggish midday to begin with. So the key for me is ensuring that you've got a whole lot of the other things in place prior to even entertaining a fat burner. And keep in mind that taking something like a fat burner is very, very seldom going to be the thing that really pushes your results over the top. You have a wide range of other things that you can potentially consider that would potentially increase your results. Again, assuming that you've got everything in place, you have a wide range of other things that you can do, including potentially switching up your training modality, possibly looking at trying to tweak and improve your sleep. Maybe you're looking at manipulating what your caloric intake is a bit. Maybe it's even getting a different mix of carbohydrates versus fats, keeping your protein pretty much the same. Maybe it's looking at changing up your meal timing a bit. Like there are so many other areas that you can focus on prior to or in place of considering going to a fat burner. Because in the experience that I've got, both working directly with individuals and then also just based on observation over close to now a decade as a professional in this business, and then a few years prior to going into being a coach myself, more often than not, the avatar for the individuals who are the primary consumers for fat burners are going to be people that are looking to utilize it as a substitute for addressing the basic foundational exercise, sleep, and nutrition habits that they really need to be focusing on. So that's what I really want you to hopefully walk away from this knowing and understanding, at least about my perspective. Now, if you've listened to this and you're thinking, I feel like I could use a little bit more help with working through some of the things that you've mentioned or that I've mentioned in this episode, then reach out, let me know. I'm always happy to connect and see if my coaching services are something that could potentially benefit you along your fitness and health journey. So with that, we are going to go ahead and take this episode to a close. As always, the Help Me Understand podcast is sponsored by Feed Your Habits. Feed Your Habits makes t-shirts and sweatshirts for people that believe that habits don't just grow on their own, they get fed. So just swing on over to Feed Your Habits. Put in the promo code JKFYH. That's in all caps, JKFYH. There'll be a link in the show notes. That'll get you 10% off and also free shipping inside the United States. So with that, we are wrapping up episode number 208 of Help Me Understand. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. Take care, and we'll talk to you next time.